Conference room fell silent the moment the rotor blades began to thunder overhead. At first, no one inside the glass-walled office paid much attention. It was just noise, distant, powerful, unusual, but easy to ignore in the middle of a tense corporate meeting. Until the sound didn't fade, it got louder, closer, and then someone whispered, "Is that a helicopter landing here?" Ethan Cole didn't look up. He stood at the far end of the polished table, grease still faintly visible under his fingernails despite washing them 3 times. His uniform, faded blue with his name stitched over the pocket, made him look out of place among suits and ties. Across from him, CEO Richard Halston adjusted his cufflinks, his face cold and impatient. "This is not a charity, Mr. Cole," Richard said sharply. "You've been late 3 times this month. And your performance, my performance." Ethan finally looked up, his voice calm but tired. "Sir, I've fixed machines no one else could even diagnose. I stayed overnight last week unpaid." Richard's lips curled slightly. "And yet you still can't manage basic discipline. This company runs on structure, not sob stories." Ethan swallowed hard. He thought of his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, who had cried that morning because he left before sunrise. He thought of the hospital bills still sitting unopened on the kitchen table. He thought of the nights he barely slept, juggling 2 jobs just to keep her safe. "I'm not asking for sympathy," Ethan said quietly. "Just fairness." Richard leaned back unimpressed. "Fairness is exactly what you're getting." A pause, then, cold and final, "You're fired." The words hit harder than any blow Ethan had ever taken. The room stayed silent. No one spoke. No one defended him because no one wanted to risk their own position. Ethan nodded slowly. Understood. Didn't argue. Didn't beg. He just turned and walked toward the door, carrying the quiet dignity of a man who had already lost too much to break now. But before his hand could touch the handle, the building trembled. This time no one ignored it. The deep, roaring thunder of rotor blades shook the glass walls. Papers fluttered. Coffee cups rattled. Employees rushed toward the windows, confusion turning into shock. "There's a helicopter landing on the roof," someone shouted. Richard stood abruptly. "What nonsense is this? Who authorized?" The door burst open. A security officer, pale and breathless, stepped inside. "Sir, there's a Navy helicopter on the roof. They're asking for—" He hesitated. "Who?" Richard snapped. The officer looked directly at Ethan. "They're asking for Falcon." The name hit the air like a lightning strike. Ethan froze. Across the room, Richard's face drained of color. No one moved. No one understood except them. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, as if a past life had just clawed its way back into the present. "That's not possible," Richard whispered under his breath. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I was hoping it wouldn't be." All eyes turned to him. "Mr. Cole," the officer said carefully, "they insist. They said it's urgent," nodded once. Then without another word he walked out of the room. Confusion exploded behind him. "What is going on?" "Falcon. A mechanic." Richard didn't follow immediately. He couldn't, because buried deep in his memory, that name meant something, something he had tried very hard to forget. Years earlier, before the suits, before the boardrooms, before the power, Richard Halston had been just another officer, young, ambitious, and terrified of failure. And Ethan Cole, Ethan had been the man who saved his life. Back then, Ethan wasn't a mechanic in a corporate garage. He was Lieutenant Ethan Cole, call sign Falcon, a Navy pilot known for impossible rescues and fearless missions. One night everything went wrong. A routine mission turned into chaos. Equipment failure. Enemy fire. Richard's aircraft spiraled out of control over open water. He remembered the panic, the choking fear, the certainty that he was going to die, until a voice cut through the static. "Hold on. I've got you." Against orders, against logic, against survival odds, Ethan dove back into danger. He maneuvered through fire, pulled off a near-impossible extraction, and brought Richard home alive. Ethan was celebrated. Decorated, respected. But Richard, he couldn't live with the truth, because the official report didn't match what really happened. It didn't mention Richard's mistake, the one that caused the entire disaster. And when the investigation came, Ethan took the fall. He never exposed Richard, never defended himself. He simply disappeared. And Richard let him know he depended on it. Back in the present, the rooftop was a storm of wind and noise. The Navy helicopter stood like a beast, blades slicing the air. 2 uniformed officers stood waiting. Ethan stepped forward, his posture unconsciously shifting. No longer the quiet mechanic, but something sharper, steadier. "Lieutenant Cole," one of them said with relief. "We finally found you," gave a faint smile. "Took you long enough. We need you back. A rescue mission, high risk. No one else can do it." Ethan hesitated. "I'm not that man anymore. Never stopped being him." Hung between them then, "Sir." Richard's voice. He had finally made it to the roof, breathless, shaken. "Ethan," he said, the name catching in his throat. For a moment neither spoke. The past stood between them, heavy, unforgiving. "You should have told them no," Richard said weakly. Ethan tilted his head. "Like I told them no back then." Richard flinched. He struggled. "I never thanked you." Looked at him, not with anger, but something deeper. "You didn't just forget to thank me," Ethan said quietly. "You let me lose everything." Truth cut deeper than any accusation. "I was afraid," Richard admitted, his voice breaking. "Afraid of losing my career, my future, and I lost mine," Ethan replied. Wind howled around them. For a moment it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Then the officer stepped forward again. "We're running out of time." Looked at the helicopter, then back at Richard, then finally he made his choice. "Go." Days passed. No one heard anything. News channels speculated. Employees whispered. The company felt different, and Richard, he couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, he saw clearly what he had done, not just to Ethan, but to himself. Power had cost him his integrity, success had buried his courage, and now a man he had broken was out there risking his life again. Then on the third day, the helicopter returned. This time it wasn't urgent, it was victorious. Ethan stepped out, tired, injured, but alive. The mission had succeeded. Lives had been saved. And this time, the truth came with him. The Navy released the full story. The past was uncovered, Ethan's sacrifice. Richard's silence, everything. The world saw it, the company saw it, and Richard, he stepped down not because he was forced, but because for the first time he chose to do the right thing. Weeks later, in a small but warm workshop, Ethan worked quietly on an old engine. Lily sat nearby, drawing. "Daddy," she said, "are you a hero?" Ethan smiled gently. "No, sweetheart." She tilted her head. "Then why do people say that?" Ethan wiped his hands and knelt beside her. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "doing the right thing feels like something big, even if it's just being a good person." Lily hugged him tightly. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt at peace. Because in the ending, titles fade, power shifts, but character is what echoes when everything else is gone.